The grand conclave of the Vex Thali resonated with a silence so profound it was a physical weight. Within the heart of their crystalline home sphere, a chamber carved from a single, light-conducting geode the size of a small moon, the luminary prime and his archons gathered. Light, the very medium of their thought and speech, pulsed in slow, anxious waves across walls that shimmered with the captured history of 1,000 millennia. This was a place of permanence, of unshakable order, yet the light that flowed from the assembled elders was tainted with the discordant frequencies of fear. At the center of the vast, circular floor, a holographic star chart glowed, a swirling nebula of Vex Thali dominion. But at its periphery a creeping, cancerous darkness was spreading. A void. An absence that consumed stars and worlds, a phenomenon their archives had no name for, so they had given it one born of dread, the Void Swarm. It did not conquer, it erased, and it was advancing. For cycles, the conclave had debated their response. Their fleets, magnificent constructs of living crystal and harnessed stellar energy, armadas that had pacified galaxies and enforced the Vex Thali doctrine of universal stability, had proven tragically, terrifyingly ineffective. Their weapons, beams of coherent gravity and lances of pure energy, struck the void swarm and simply vanished, their energy unspooling into the nothingness. Their ships, monuments to Vex Thali engineering, were not destroyed, but unmade, their crystalline hulls dissolving into the silent, encroaching abyss. The Vex Thali, a species that had mastered the physical universe, found themselves confronting an enemy that did not seem to obey its laws. And so, in their desperation, their gaze had turned to the anomalous, the unpredictable, the deeply unsettling species that called themselves humans. The reports remain unchanged, Luminary Prime, resonated the voice of Archon Militant Vorlag. His crystalline form, a sharp and imposing structure of obsidian-like facets, pulsed with a harsh crimson light. The human sphere of influence continues its illogical expansion. They claim star systems with no visible martial presence. Their worlds are soft, unfortified. Their orbital structures are for commerce and habitation, not for defense. It is a posture of absolute weakness or absolute deception. His light patterns were sharp, accusatory. Vorlag was a being of force and matter. He understood power as a physical absolute, something that could be measured in mass, energy output, and strategic deployment. Humans defied every metric he held sacred. Opposite him, the much more ancient form of Chronomancer Estella shimmered with a gentle, inquisitive cerulean. Her crystalline lattice was smoother, worn by eons of contemplation, her light soft and multi-layered. Deception requires motive, Archon Militant. What would they gain by feigning weakness to the galaxy, especially now with the swarm consuming all in its path? And if they are weak, how do they expand? How do they hold territory that more aggressive species would have surely contested? There is a contradiction here our logic has yet to resolve. Her voice was a slow, harmonic chord, a counterpoint to Vorlag's percussive staccato. Luminary Prime Kalen, his form a brilliant, pure white that seemed to absorb and gentle the light of the others, remained silent at the head of the conclave. His facets were a complex network of internal refractions, his thoughts running deeper than any other. The weight of his civilization rested upon the perfect geometry of his being. He let the debate flow, for in the clash of light, truth could sometimes be forged. He focused on the data streaming into the central chart, the humans. A species barely out of its planetary cradle, by Vex Thali standards. They were ephemeral, biological, bound to cycles of decay and regeneration that seemed wasteful and chaotic. Their technology was a baffling mix of primitive chemical propulsion and impossible, physics-defying information networks that seemed to operate outside of spacetime. They built no grand fleets. Their ships were small, functional, and utterly without the hardened grace of a Vex Thali star scythe. And yet where they went, they prospered. They terraformed worlds with an ease that bordered on the offensive. They established colonies that became vibrant centers of culture and knowledge in the span of a few generations, a mere blink to the Vex Thali, and no one challenged them. The rapacious Cathar, the territorial Glyptodons, the parasitic Shnal, all the galaxy's predators seemed to give the human sphere a wide berth, as if marked by some invisible warning. The Vex Thali had scanned for this warning, for the hidden armadas, the stealth fleets, the planetary weapon emplacements. They had found nothing, absolutely nothing. It was this nothingness that terrified them more than any fleet could. They must possess a fleet, Vorlag pulsed his. Crimson light intensifying, casting sharp shadows on the chamber floor. It is the only logical conclusion. It is hidden, cloaked with a technology we have not yet penetrated. They hold it in reserve, a blade in the dark. Their entire civilization is a feint, a mask of peace to hide their true power. When we petitioned them for aid, we offered them an alliance. What they heard was a plea for them to reveal their hand. They will use our desperation to their advantage. An advantage for what? Estella's cerulean light washed over Vorlag's aggressive red, calming the ambient energy of the chamber. To gain territory, they take it already without conflict. To gain resources, their methods of energy and matter generation appear to be post-scarcity. To gain dominance over the Vex Thali, why would a species that shows no interest in empire building suddenly wish to dominate an empire on the brink of annihilation? Your logic, Archon Militant, is based on Vex Thali ambitions, on a history of conquest and consolidation. You are trying to fit an anomalous entity into a familiar framework. Perhaps the framework itself is the error. The chamber fell silent again, the weight of Estella's words resonating in the crystalline air. Kalen's light brightened, drawing the attention of all. His voice was a complex harmony, carrying the authority of ages. The chronomancer speaks with wisdom. We have analyzed the humans through the lens of our own history, and it has yielded only confusion. We see their lack of warships and call them weak or deceitful. We see their rapid, peaceful expansion and call it an anomaly. We have assumed that power in this universe is expressed in one primary form, the capacity for overwhelming physical force. The Void Swarm has taught us that this assumption may be flawed. It is a force that our force cannot touch. He turned his focus to the encroaching darkness on the star chart. Another Vex Thali system, a nexus of 7 colonized worlds, was about to fall. The evacuation was incomplete. The fleets sent to defend it were already being unmade. We sent our petition to the humans 5 of their cycles ago. We laid bare the nature of the threat. We admitted our failures. We asked for their assistance, for the aid of their fleets, wherever and whatever they might be. Their reply arrived this cycle. They have agreed to send a representative, an ambassador. Vorlag's light flared violently. An ambassador, one. They mock us. We face existential oblivion, and they send a diplomat to negotiate terms. They are scavengers, waiting for us to die so they can pick over the bones of our worlds. We should retract the offer and devote our remaining energy to the Forge worlds. We must build more ships. We must find a way to make our force matter. And what if more ships are simply more fuel for the void? Estella countered softly. We have thrown fleets at this problem, Vorlag. All we have accomplished is to feed the nothingness. The humans have offered a dialogue. To refuse it now, out of pride or fear, would be the height of folly. A single ambassador may carry more weight than an armada if their power is of a nature we do not comprehend. Kalen's light held steady, a beacon of calm in the swirling storm of debate. The ambassador has been granted passage. They will arrive within the next rotation. They will be received here in the Grand Conclave. We will listen, we will observe, and we will learn. For too long, we have believed ourselves to be the ultimate arbiters of reality. It is time we considered the possibility that we have understood only a fraction of it. His final resonance echoed with a profound sense of finality, and the debate was silenced. The Archons focused their crystalline minds on the approaching anomaly, the single human vessel that now moved through their space, a tiny, insignificant mote that carried with it either the galaxy's salvation or a final, bitter lesson in humility. The Vex Thali, who thought in terms of fleets and stellar engines, were about to have a conversation about the nature of power itself, and they were utterly unprepared. The human vessel was a masterpiece of understatement. It was small, sleek, and unadorned, gliding into the docking cradle of the Vex Thali home sphere with a quiet efficiency that was almost insulting. It possessed no visible weapon ports, no overt shield emitters, no grand projections of power. It was a simple transport, and Vorlag's internal crystalline structure vibrated with a low, grating frequency of contempt as he observed its arrival from the Conclave's observation portal. He saw it not as a symbol of confidence, but of an arrogance so profound it bordered on insanity. To come into the heart of the Vex Thali Empire at a time of its greatest crisis, with such a pathetic display, was a calculated insult. When the ambassador finally entered the Grand Conclave, the sense of anticlimax was a palpable force. It was a single organism, a bipedal. Soft-fleshed creature encased in a form-fitting dark blue fabric that seemed to absorb the chamber's ambient light. It moved with a fluid grace, its steps silent on the crystalline floor. It wore no helmet, its face exposed to the carefully managed atmosphere. The Vex Thali, who communicated with shimmering light and resonating harmonics, found the human face to be a disturbing canvas of subtle, unreadable shifts in muscle and tissue. It was a mask of utter composure. The human stopped at the center of the chamber, directly beneath the holographic chart of their besieged galaxy. It inclined its head in a gesture the universal translators tagged as a sign of respect. Then, a voice emerged, not from the creature itself, but seemingly from the air around it. A perfectly modulated, calm series of tones that the conclave's own systems translated into the formal Vexthali harmonic language. It was a female voice, though the concept was a biological abstraction to the crystalline beings before her. I am Ambassador Eva Rostova. I come on behalf of the Terran Confederacy in response to your petition. I am authorized to speak for humanity and to offer our assistance. The simplicity of the statement was unnerving. Vorlag was the first to break the silence, his crimson light pulsing impatiently. Ambassador, you see the state of our galaxy. The swarm devours all. We did not petition for a speaker. We petitioned for military aid. We asked for your fleets. Where are they? Eva Rostova's expression did not change. Her gaze, a deep and steady brown, swept across the assembled archons before settling on Vorlag. The nature of our fleets is perhaps not what you envision, Archon Militant. To understand our assistance, you must first understand our perspective on conflict. Perspective? Vorlag's resonance was a sharp, angry crackle. Perspective does not halt the erasure of stars. Logic dictates that a threat must be met with countervailing force. We have tracked your species' expansion. We know you hold thousands of worlds. Such an interstellar civilization cannot exist without a powerful military. To claim otherwise is a falsehood. We are not fledglings to be deceived by diplomatic platitudes. Show us your strength, or this meeting is a waste of what little time our civilization has left. The human ambassador remained perfectly still for a long moment, her placid demeanor a stark contrast to Vorlag's barely contained fury. The silence stretched, filled only by the low hum of the conclave's energy systems and the faint, mournful chime of another star system blinking out on the holographic map. It was the system they had been watching, the nexus of 7 worlds. Its light was gone. A wave of dissonant, grief-filled harmonics passed through the assembled Vexthali. Eva Rostova's gaze drifted up to the newly darkened patch on the map. A flicker of something, an emotion the Vexthali could not parse, crossed her face before it was gone. Force is a crude tool, Archon Militant. It is the application of energy to rearrange matter. It is loud, it is inefficient, and it is ultimately temporary. You seek to build a wall against the ocean. We have learned it is better to understand the tides. Empty philosophy, Vorlag pulsed. The tide is at our throat. Your words are meaningless without action. Then let us speak of action, the ambassador said, her voice retaining its impossible calm. She turned her attention to Luminary Prime Kalen. Your fleets met the swarm with weapons designed to break apart molecular bonds and warp spacetime. You sought to destroy it. But how can you destroy an absence? How can you apply force to avoid? You cannot. It is like trying to punch a hole in a shadow. The act itself is meaningless. Chronomancer Estella's cerulean light softened, pulsing with intense curiosity. You speak as if you understand the nature of the swarm, ambassador. Our finest minds have failed to define it. To us, it is a null state, an advancing wave of entropy that unravels reality. That is an accurate, if incomplete, assessment, Eva replied. It is a failure in the structural integrity of causality, a tear in the fabric. Your weapons, your application of massive energy, only serves to widen the tear to feed the unraveling. You are trying to fight a flood by throwing stones into it. A heavy silence descended once more. The Archons were exchanging complex light patterns, a silent debate filled with shock and dawning comprehension. This soft-bodied creature, this representative of a fleeting, chaotic species, was speaking of the fundamental nature of the universe with a clarity that had eluded them for millennia. If what you say is true, Kalen's resonant voice finally filled the chamber, his white light focused entirely on the human, then our methods are not only futile, they are actively harmful. What then is your solution? What is this perspective you offer? What is the nature of the human fleet? Eva Rostova, too. Okay, a slow breath, a faint, organic sound in the sterile, crystalline chamber. We do not have a fleet in the way you comprehend it. We do not project force. We do not build ships of war to shatter our enemies. She paused, letting the statement hang in the air, a direct contradiction of everything the Vexthali held as self-evident. We, she continued, her voice dropping to a tone of profound gravity, are a species that learned a difficult lesson early in our history. We learned that the most powerful force in the universe is not energy, but consensus. The universe, at its most fundamental level, is not a collection of particles governed by immutable laws. It is a quantum tapestry woven from probability and observation. The laws are not rules, they are habits. Reality is a shared agreement. Vorlag's light flickered on the verge of chaotic rage. This is madness, the ravings of a mystical cult, not a starfaring civilization. Reality is absolute. Matter, energy, time, these are constants. Are they? The ambassador asked, her gaze unwavering. Your own science understands the observer effect. You know that at the quantum level, the state of a particle is not fixed until it is measured. Existence is a negotiation between the potential and the actual. We, humanity, have simply learned to negotiate on a broader scale. She raised a hand, and from a device on her wrist, a new image projected into the air next to the Vexthali star chart. It was a swirling, impossibly complex network of light, like a galaxy made of pure information. It was beautiful, intricate, and alive. This is our fleet. This is the human consciousness network. Every human mind connected through a quantum-entangled substrate. We are not billions of separate individuals. We are a single, coherent conscious entity when we choose to be. We are an observer of unprecedented scale. Estella's light pulsed in a pattern of pure, unadulterated awe. A collective consciousness, the processing power would be inconceivable. It is not about processing power, Eva corrected gently. It is not a computer. It is a lens, a way to focus belief, a tool to establish a new consensus. She gestured back to the star chart, to the darkness where the 7 worlds of the Nexus had been. The swarm is an idea archon militant. It is the idea of nothing made manifest. It spreads because reality in those sectors is weak, its quantum waveform unstable. It is a whisper of non-existence that once heard becomes a shout. You cannot fight it, but you can disagree with it. The full, terrifying, magnificent weight of her words began to settle upon the conclave. Vorlag's crimson light dimmed, his sharp form seeming to shrink. The concept was so alien, so fundamentally contrary to the Vexthali worldview that it was nearly impossible to process. Power that was not physical, a weapon that was a shared thought, a fleet made of minds. As if sensing their disbelief, Eva Rostova's gaze turned to the star chart again. Another Vexthali system, a critical forge world responsible for birthing new ships, lay directly in the swarm's path. The holographic display showed the edge of the darkness beginning to touch the system's outer cometary cloud. Red alert symbols flashed, their silent, desperate warnings filling the chamber with a fresh wave of tension. The swarm approaches your system of K-Thervex, she stated, her voice calm as ever. Your fleets are too far to intervene. Evacuation is impossible. By your metrics, this world is lost. Vorlag's light flared, a final, desperate spark of his martial worldview. And what will you do, Ambassador? Will you think it away? The question was laced with a bitter, incredulous sarcasm. Eva Rostova simply closed her eyes. Yes, she said softly, that is precisely what we will do. The chamber became utterly still. The human ambassador stood motionless, a fragile organic statue in the heart of the Crystal Empire. For a moment, nothing happened. The red alerts on the map continued to flash. The darkness continued its slow, inexorable creep. Vorlag's light began to pulse with a triumphant, despairing rhythm. He had been right. It was all just words, all just a hollow boast from a species of deluded mystics. Then it began. It was not an explosion. It was not a flash of light or a wave of energy. It was something far stranger, far more profound. On the holographic display at the precise point where the void swarm touched the K-Thervex system, the sensors of the Vexthali network began to report anomalies, impossibilities. The swarm did not retreat. It did not shatter. It faltered. The clean, sharp edge of the advancing void began to fray. The Vexthali sensor readings, displayed in streams of complex geometric runes beside the map, went mad. They reported causality violations, localized reversals of entropy, quantum probabilities folding back on themselves. It was as if the universe in that specific sector had suddenly become uncertain of its own rules. The swarm's advance slowed, then stopped. The absolute, unshakable reality of its existence was being challenged. In the conclave, the archons could feel it. A subtle, pervasive hum that was not sound but a vibration in the very fabric of spacetime. It was a resonance of pure, focused intention, a wave of information that whispered a new truth into the void. The whisper said, "You are not here. This place is a place of creation, not unmaking. Your existence is a paradox, and it is resolved." On the map, the darkness did not flee. It simply thinned, like smoke dissipating in a breeze that wasn't there. The absolute blackness faded to a translucent gray, and then, star by star, the light of the K-Thervex system began to shine through. The swarm was not defeated. It was being edited. It was being convinced on a fundamental, ontological level that it had never been there at all. The Vexthali sensors now reported that the system was stable. The swarm's energy signature was gone. Not destroyed, just gone, as if it had been a bad dream. Eva Rostova opened her eyes. Her expression was unchanged, but the Vexthali now saw her and her entire species in a completely new light. The fragile organic being was a conduit for a power that dwarfed their entire civilization's martial might. Her species did not need a fleet. They were the fleet. Their unity of mind was a weapon that could rewrite reality itself. Silence, a silence deeper and more complete than any the Grand Conclave had ever known. It was the silence of a worldview being shattered. It was the silence of awe. It was the silence of terror and of a dawning, humbling respect. Vorlag's crimson light was entirely extinguished, his obsidian form inert, a monument to a dead philosophy. He was not damaged, merely overwhelmed. His mind, so rigid and certain, could not process a universe where belief was a weapon more potent than a gravity lance. It was Chronomancer Estella who finally broke the stillness, her cerulean light a soft, trembling wave of pure wonder. How? The word was not a question, but a plea for understanding. Eva Rostova looked at the ancient, wise being before her. It is not a power we wield lightly, she said, her voice carrying a trace of weariness now. To impose a new reality is a delicate and dangerous act. It requires a perfect consensus, an absolute unity of will, a deep understanding of the consequences. We did not destroy the swarm. We simply reinforced the reality that was already there. We reminded the universe of its own nature. We are not gods. We are guardians. Gardeners of causality. Luminary Prime Kalen's brilliant white light slowly intensified, but it was different now. It was softer, infused with the blue of Estella's wonder and cleansed of the harsh red of Vorlag's aggression. He looked at the human, then at the saved star system on the map, then at the inert form of his Archon militant. Everything he had ever known about power, about the structure of the cosmos, had been redefined in a single, silent moment. The Vexthali had built an empire on the mastery of the physical. Humanity had built a civilization on the mastery of the metaphysical. We have been arrogant, Kalen's voice resonated, the harmony filled with a new, profound humility. We saw your soft bodies and your ephemeral lives, and we called you weak. We saw your lack of warships, and we called you primitives or liars. We have been staring at the mountain and ignoring the sky. Your offer of assistance, we accept it, not as an alliance of fleets, but as a partnership of perspectives. The human ambassador nodded slowly. That is all we have ever offered. We will help you. We will teach you what we can. The swarm is a symptom, not the disease. It is a flaw in the fabric, and together we can learn to mend it. Humanity cannot be the sole guardian of reality. Such a burden would eventually corrupt us. The universe needs more observers, more gardeners. In the cycles that followed, a new age dawned for the Vexthali. The human ambassador remained on their home sphere, a permanent liaison in the Grand Conclave. The inert form of Vorlag was respectfully removed. His mind unable to reconcile the new reality, he had entered a state of deep meditative hibernation from which the healers said he may never emerge. His rigidity had been his undoing. The rest of the Vexthali, however, under the guidance of Kalen and Estella, began the slow, arduous process of unlearning a billion years of dogma. Human teachers arrived, not in warships, but in simple, elegant vessels of learning. They were philosophers, physicists, artists, and historians. They taught the Vexthali not how to build better weapons, but how to quiet their own minds. They taught them the principles of collective consciousness, of empathy as a quantum-entangled state, of shared intention as a force of nature. For the Vexthali, a species of logical absolutes, it was the most difficult lesson they had ever undertaken. They, who could calculate the precise gravitational pull of 1 trillion stars, now struggled with the seemingly simple act of sharing a single, unified thought. The war against the Void Swarm changed. It was no longer a war of attrition, but one of reclamation. At the edge of the encroaching darkness, human and Vexthali minds would join. The humans would form the core of the consensus, their species, long practice giving them the strength and clarity to lead. The Vexthali, with their immense lifespans and incredible capacity for focus, would act as amplifiers, their crystalline minds providing a stable, resonant framework for the human intention to work through. System by system, the tide of nothingness was turned back, not with fire and fury, but with the quiet, inexorable power of a shared belief in existence. The darkness was not fought, it was enlightened. During one of these joint meditations, with Kalen and Eva Rostova acting as the focal points for their respective species, something unexpected occurred. As they pushed back a particularly resilient pocket of the swarm near the galactic core, their combined consciousness brushed against something else. It was not the chaotic, entropic signature of the swarm. it was a structure. An artifact deep within the unreality of the void, something the swarm had consumed and erased long ago, but whose informational ghost still remained, like a fossilized echo. Their collective minds focused on it, exploring its faint, residual pattern. It was a beacon, a transmitter, and it had been broadcasting a message. The message was not in any language they knew, but its intent was clear, written in the universal language of mathematics and quantum states. It was a warning. After the meditation, in the quiet of the Grand Conclave, Eva projected the recovered data onto the central display. Gone was the star chart of their own galaxy. In its place was an image of impossible scale. It showed countless galaxies, a web of cosmic filaments stretching across unfathomable distances. A single point of origin was highlighted, far beyond their own local group, in the depths of intergalactic space. And from that point, a wave was spreading. The void swarm, Kalen resonated, his light a low, fearful pulse. It did not originate in our galaxy. No, Eva said, her voice heavy. It didn't. The swarm is not a natural phenomenon. It's not a tear in reality. It's a weapons after effect, a scorched earth policy on a cosmic scale. The image on the display shifted, focusing on the echo they had found within the swarm. The beacon's message began to translate, rendered not as words, but as a sequence of events, a story told in pure data. It showed a civilization, ancient beyond comprehension, facing an enemy that did not consume or conquer, but converted. It moved from galaxy to galaxy, not with ships, but as a wavefront of pure information, a signal that reprogrammed the very laws of physics to serve its own ends. The ancient civilization, in a final, desperate act of self-sacrifice, had turned their own greatest weapon upon themselves and their enemy. They had unleashed the principle of absolute negation, the void swarm, to create a firewall of non-existence, a buffer of absolute nothingness between their infected region of the universe and the rest of reality. They burned their own corner of the cosmos to stop it from spreading, Estella whispered in awe and horror. The swarm, it was a shield. A shield that is now failing, Eva confirmed, her eyes fixed on the display. The signal we found, it was the beacon's final, repeating broadcast before it was erased. It contains a warning and a key. The display changed one last time. It showed a complex quantum waveform, a signature. This is the signature of the entity they were fighting, Eva explained. The true enemy. The swarm was just the scar tissue from an ancient war. This is the infection, and the beacon's data indicates that the wavefront, the signal that converts reality, is still out there. It has spent eons bypassing the swarm, and it is coming. The Grand Conclave was silent. Their victory over the swarm suddenly felt small, insignificant. They had learned to mend a tear in the fabric of their reality, only to discover that the fabric itself was threatened by a force that sought to reweave it into something alien and other. They had mistaken the smoke for the fire. Kalen looked at Eva Rostova, the being from a species he had once dismissed as weak and insignificant. He saw not a soft-bodied ephemeral, but a partner, a peer. Their two species, one of ancient, rigid matter and one of young, fluid consciousness, had found common ground. They had learned a new way to exist, a new definition of power. They had prepared themselves, without knowing it, for a war that would not be fought for territory or resources, but for the very soul of reality itself. Humans needed a fleet, Kalen resonated, his voice a quiet, profound harmony that filled the chamber, carrying the weight of a truth finally, fully understood. He looked at the calm, determined face of the human ambassador. They were so not true. What you have is so much more. Eva's gaze met his, and for the first time she allowed a small, determined smile to touch her lips. What we have, Luminary Prime, she corrected softly, and we are going to need it. On the display before them, the map of the known universe seemed to shrink, becoming just one small, precious island of light in a vast, encroaching ocean of the unknown. Their war was over. The real war was about to begin.